Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Alex Driskell again from Sweet Georgia Sports coming at you today. And today I'm joined by the Dustin Henderson to my Steve Harrington. If you don't get that reference, it's from Stranger Things. Don't worry about it. I got totally addicted to it over Thanksgiving break. But anyway, I'm joined by Alex Merritt, the other Alex here at SGS. Alex, how are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome today, Alex. And per usual, it is a great day to be a dog. And if I might add, it's about to be a great weekend to be a dog as well.
No, it's not. I don't see how it's a great day or even a great weekend to be something that you misspell, because the proper spelling is D-O-G and not D-A-W-G, and it's pronounced dog, not dog. But I mean,
well, if I might add one more thing, I'd rather be a dog than a hell of an engineer, Alex.
That's a very, very good point, because guess what? Engineers, they get all dirty and sweaty and have all these grease and oil marks on them. But a dog, especially Ugga. How good is it to be Ugga? You get sideline seats at a game, and when it gets too hot, you get some ice underneath your belly, and when it gets too hot on the ground, you can go back into your air-conditioned doghouse. How much better can it get, honestly, if you're a Bulldog, especially the one on the sideline for UGA? But that's besides the point, because guess what? Our two favorite teams...
I can tell you what could make it better. I can tell you what could make it better.
What?
It would be better for Ugga if he could watch his Georgia Bulldogs beat the Auburn Plainsmen, War Eagles. I don't know what to call them.
It's the Tigers.
This upcoming Saturday.
It's the Tigers.
Are you sure?
I'm very sure it's the Tigers.
Okay.
It's the Tigers.
Whatever you say, pal.
It's the Tigers. But yeah, as you mentioned, it's SEC Championship game week, and it's our two favorite teams. Of course, you go to Georgia. You're actually going to be there because you're in the band. And my favorite team, Auburn. And it's so exciting just to see a rematch of these two teams, because the first time Auburn clearly got the better of Georgia. They just whooped tail 40-17. And also, I didn't know this, a little bit of history, nice little bit of trivia for people, is that this is the very first meeting in the SEC Championship game between Auburn and Georgia. So that's a very, very neat tidbit. We'll get into a couple tidbits later on in the video. But anyway, recap for both teams. AJ, I don't know why I just called you AJ. Alex, go ahead and recap Georgia's season for me.
Well, Alex, despite that just overall bad, uncharacteristic loss against Auburn 3 weeks ago, this is Georgia's best season in a while, arguably since 2012, which was the last time Georgia represented the East in the SEC Championship. Georgia is 11-1 on the year, 7-1 in the SEC. Of course, that one loss coming to Auburn. And Georgia's pretty much, despite that one hiccup, has just dominated their competition. If you take a look at their stats, besides passing yards per game, which can be a deceiving stat, they pretty much dominated all across the board. Scoring margin, rush yards per game, defensive points given up per game, just all across the table, Georgia's dominated on paper at least.
Yeah, that's very true. The way you put it, 11-1, I like to say 11 in Auburn. But anyway, it's very true.
That's very original. Classic Auburn humor.
I know, right? I'm fantastic. I had some humor on Twitter today, too. But anyway, as you were saying, this is probably one of the best years in Georgia football, recent history at least. You're playing for the SEC Championship game. You're on the outside looking in, but you're right on the outside looking in terms of the playoff. You're in national championship contention. You're looking like a powerhouse set up to dominate the SEC and just dominate in the nation, stay nationally relevant for the next couple of years because of what Kirby's done in terms of developing on-the-field talent and then going out and recruiting, which is he's just blown it out of the water. He's made a total splash there. It's just fantastic to see for Georgia. That way they can actually stay relevant nationally and just dominate the East, which is a little bit weaker. But again, great solid season for Georgia, and the same could be said for Auburn. We've had two hiccups. We had an early loss to Clemson, who is the number one team of the nation. That was by 8. We lost by 8 in that one, and then we just absolutely collapsed against LSU in Baton Rouge. We lost that one by 4 points. It was 27-23. And so with that, Auburn's 10-2 in overall and 7-1 in the SEC. Points per game, we're scoring 36.7, which is good for 19th in the nation. Pass yards per game, we really don't pass. We pass a good bit, but it's not like Missouri or Oklahoma State. It's just going to drop back and throw for 35 to 40, 45 times a game and just light you up in pass yards per game. We're averaging 229.4 pass yards per game, which is good for 64th in the nation, and we are running the ball at a very effective rate. Not as much as Georgia, but we are averaging 237.7 yards on the ground, which is good for 20th in the nation. And so, I mean, just talking about the offense, what is one strength, or what's the biggest strength per se for Georgia going into this game?
Well, this is my own personal opinion, and not everyone will agree with this, but despite one-sided stats favored towards the rushing offense, this offense is honestly pretty balanced, in my opinion. That can beat you in the run game, obviously, but does pose a threat with their passing attack if need be.
Yeah, I mean, it's debatable, but overall, it's debatable when it comes to good defenses like a Notre Dame or like an Auburn, because you kind of saw the passing game not quite be there. But then again, it's Jake Fromm. He's only 18, 19 years old. He's a true freshman playing in huge games very, very early on in his career. But overall for the season, yeah, it's a very solid statement. I mean, just the rushing attack, the four-headed monster with Nick Chubb, DeAndre Swift, Elijah Holyfield, and gosh, I forgot the other guy's name. What's the other guy's name? Number one. I forgot.
He's better than any of Auburn's backs. His name is Sony Michel.
Sony Michel. No. No, that's a false narrative. But just that four-headed monster for Georgia is proved to be an absolute, just an absolute train and just an absolute force in the SEC and in the nation. I would like to see Jake Fromm make better passes and better throws this time around against Auburn, but that also is more due to Auburn's pass rush and how it was outstanding against Georgia. But we'll get into that later as well. But the biggest offensive strength for Auburn is the play action and kind of like the quick game off the rushing attack, and the rushing attack is led by none other than Kerryon Johnson, who again is day to day. We don't. Gus said that he wasn't able to practice Sunday night, but they're monitoring him day to day. It's been thrown in the air that it could be a sprained AC joint, something in the shoulder, or as me and a friend were talking at work, it could just be a pinched nerve, something of that magnitude. But those injuries do kind of linger. But with that being said, I'm very interested to see what this offense looks like with a limited Kerryon Johnson. Will we be able to run as effectively? Will we be able to have better play actions off of that with limited Kerryon Johnson, with a limited rushing attack? And so I'm just really, really excited to see, really, really interested to see all the adjustments that are going to be made. And one weakness, or the big weakness going into this game for UGA, is what, Alex?
Well, actually, before I go into that, I just kind of want to add a little more onto what you were saying about Kerryon Johnson. And to me, at first, my first impression was that Kerryon wasn't going to play on Saturday, but now it seems like he most likely is. But we were just talking about this. Kerryon averages around 25 carries a game, somewhere around there. How much can he handle? Because he's obviously a little banged up from that Iron Bowl, because this last stretch of the season for Auburn has been pretty rough. So how much can Kerryon handle, and how much more do we see from Cam Martin or guys like Darius Slayton and Eli Stove?
That's a very good point, because, I mean, like you said, Kerryon's going to be very limited. He might be on a pitch count, per se, on how many carries he actually gets, because you said he's averaging around 25 carries per game. And so that's a lot for any running back in the SEC. And with him being limited and him being less than 100%, we just need more guys to step up. Like you said, Cam Martin, who I think is underrated. He runs with a certain suddenness. He hits the hole with a lot of quickness. And Eli Stove, kind of an interesting stat. the first go around with Auburn versus Georgia, Darius Slayton, Eli Stove. Excuse me, I'm getting all these names mixed up. Eli Stove had more rushing yards total than Georgia's offense combined. So that's a little interesting stat from last game. I'm just going to be interested to see the adjustments. If Carrion actually gets to 25 carries, and if not, who else we incorporate in getting carries, whether that's Cam Martin, Devin Barrett, Eli Stove, any of those guys. Just really, really excited to see. Maybe even see a couple Wildcat kind of like read option packages with Malik Willis, who has shown more often than not that he can break a big play off the read option. And again, so we were going to talk about weaknesses. What's the one big weakness for UGA going into this game against Auburn again?
Well, and this is my same weakness that I had for the first time around, but this is another big game for Jake Fromm. And like he said, he's only 18, 19 years old. He's only started 10, 11 games in his college career. I mean, basically, he started the whole season, but technically he didn't get the start against App State. But he's a young QB with another tough test. Luckily, this isn't as hostile of an environment as Jordan Hare, but it's still something to note. And another thing is that the offense tends to, have slow starts. And you saw it against even Georgia Tech, whose defense is subpar at best. But you even saw the offense, we only put up 17 points in the first half. And it was kind of stagnant for most of that half. So I think the slow starts are something to note. And Jake Fromm's inexperience compared to someone like Jared Stidham is also something important.
Agreed. I mean, that really plays into, one, Jake Fromm being young, and Jim Chaney and Kirby Smart don't want to, throw him into the fire, per se. They just want to, ease him into it. And also that's Jim Chaney kind of getting vanilla sometimes, even though it's a very diverse rushing attack. Sometimes it can get too vanilla, and it's a ball control offense. It's a more one-back ball control offense that we stated in previous videos, and that's another reason I think the offense gets off to a slow start for Georgia. But a weakness for Auburn is, even though they've progressed a lot better than I think they would, Prince Tega Wanagogo and Markel Harrell, both of them earlier in the year just looked absolutely terrible, but injuries to Darius James and Mike Horton, who both play left tackle and left guard most of the time, injuries have forced Prince Tega and Markel Harrell into those roles as starters, and they progressed nicely. But again, it's a pressure-packed situation. They're both young. They're both very raw, and I think that could come back to bite them second go-around against Georgia. And so, again, we'll see. So moving on from all the offensive talk, we're going to talk about defense, because guess what? It's championship week, and defense does win championships. So I keep calling you AJ, but I know that's not your name anymore. It's Alex. But Alex, give me the lowdown on UGA's defense this year.
Well, similar to Georgia's season in general, this is the best Georgia defense I've seen in a while. The most recent I can think of that was even close to this was the 2011 defense under Todd Grantham, which was actually around, this stat line in terms of where Georgia's sitting statistically. But anyways, right now Georgia's giving up around 14 points a game, which is top 5 in the nation. They're only giving up 165 passing yards per game, which is 3rd in the nation, and they're giving up 112 yards rushing yards per game, which is 12th in the nation. And that's a good statistic. However, the rushing defense has faltered in the second half of the season. I think a large part of that is Auburn, because their stat line was just insane given to what Georgia's usually given up in terms of averages. So I think that stat line is a little skewed. However, it is indicative that Georgia's rush defense has faltered a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, coming down the stretch, when you play in the SEC, nicks and bruises are expected, and you get tired toward the home stretch, and so that's kind of expected with rush yards. But again, I will totally agree with your sentiment that that this is the best UGA defense since 2011, 2012, when guys like Jarvis Jones were there. And I totally and completely agree with that. And speaking of recent history in defenses, this is the best defense Auburn has had probably since 2007, maybe even since 2004 with Gene Chizik as the defense coordinator, which was an absolute monster of a defense. But points per game, they're only allowing 16.4, which is good for ninth in the nation. They are allowing 181.8 yards per game in the air, which is good for 17th. And then rushing yards, they are allowing just under 126, which is good for 21st in the nation. So both defenses are very, very stout. I really like Auburn's defensive line. I'm absolutely in love with the defensive line led by Jeff Holland, Dontavius Russell, Derek Brown, Marlon Davidson. Nick Coe's gotten some more playing time. T.D. Moultrie is looking outstanding in his freshman year, coming off the edge as a pass rusher in pass rush situations. And that's something that they do well, is get after the quarterback. And this is probably the best tackling team in the nation. They stress tackling in the open field, making good open field tackles daily in practice. It's a very, very good fundamental defense that gets after the quarterback and makes the everyday play and makes solid tackles play in and play out. And so, again, talking about the defense, what's the biggest strength in terms of the dog defense, AJ or Alex? Gosh, I did it again. I called you AJ. What's
classic Auburn brain capacity? Classic.
Oh my gosh.
Anyways, Georgia's strength on defense this year, I think, is just depth, which is what you need as an elite defense. And Auburn also has this. But for me specifically, along the D line, the depth we have there is really what's allowing this defense to really click. And we are deep in pass rushers. You got guys like DeAndre Walker and Walter Grant who are coming off the bench as rotational pass rushers, and they're still making plays on limited snaps. So I think depth along the D-line and front seven in general is a very big factor as to why Georgia has had this much success so far.
Totally agree. I mean, you have 4- and 5-star recruits all over the field. The thing, I do love the depth. I do love the depth all across the board, even though I think Auburn has the slight edge in defensive line depth. But anyway, the thing that I think Georgia skews more to is versatility. They run a base 3-4, which is something Kirby and Mel Tucker ran with Nick Saban in Alabama. That's their base. It's a base 3-4. But when they go up against more spread teams, like, say, an Auburn or a Notre Dame, they usually switch to a more nickel defense, which is more like a 4-2-5. And they just stay, and most of the time they just keep the same guys on the field, and they're extremely versatile. They still have all their playmakers and all their big-time guys on the field when they switch from their base 3-4 to a 4-2-5 to make room and to adjust to the spread offenses. And I think that's the big thing for Georgia's defense. Also, I'm very, very interested in seeing all the adjustments. Does Georgia play more conservatively in their pass rush, or do they play a lot more aggressive? Do they bring more heat? Do they want to get Jared Stidham disrupted and stuff like that? The biggest strength for Auburn's defense is the depth and talent along the defensive line. I know I mentioned them earlier. Jeff Holland, Dontavius Russell, Derek Brown, Marlon Davidson, T.D. Moultrie, Nick Coe, all those guys. We got Andrew Williams. We go about 7 to 8 deep on the defensive line, and that proves very, very vital against a team like Georgia who wants to run the ball ad nauseum and just wear you down. And they're also very good at pass rushing, especially Jeff Holland, especially T.D. Moultrie and Nick Coe, while guys like Dontavius Russell, Marlon Davidson, Andrew Williams, and Derek Brown, they're very, very good at stalemating their guys on the offensive line. They lock out their arms, and they use that little sneak tactic that D-line coaches. They lock out and then just sneak and then just shed and make the tackle, and they keep gap integrity as well. So those are the strengths of both UGA and AU's defenses. Now, what's one weakness for UGA?
I'm going to keep this short, but basically the secondary has been a little inconsistent. That's all I'm going to say. The secondary has just been a little inconsistent, so hopefully they step it up on Saturday.
Totally agree, and I will keep it short as well on my end, and I will say the same. The secondary for Auburn outside of Carlton Davis and your homeboy Trigger Trey Matthews. Shut up. He's the greatest.
Transfer from Georgia was the worst decision of his life, and he knows it.
No, he is thriving down on the plains. But anyway, outside of Carlton Davis and Trey Matthews, Javaris Davis has stepped it up a little bit, but outside of those 2 to 3 guys, we really, really need to step it up, especially in a second version of a game, because they'll know the weakness. They'll know the weaknesses to a point now, and so they might pick on guys a little bit more. And so, outside of Carlton Davis, Trey Matthews, and Javaris Davis, Tiger secondary really, really needs to step up. And so, moving on from the defenses, I love talking about X factors. What's an X factor on offense for Georgia?
Well, and this might be a little obvious, but I'm going to go with Jake Fromm here, because in the first game against Auburn, the performance overall by the offense proved that he won't be able to win the game without balance. And he'll need one of his best games, if not his best game this season, to balance the offense and at least keep Auburn's defense honest. And if we do that, I honestly think Georgia has a good chance to win. But if Jim Chaney has a stick up his butt and keeps trying to run the ball when we're only averaging 1.5 yards a carry, there's going to be a similar result to what happened 3 weeks ago.
That's very true. I think Jim Chaney does adjust, even though I still think he'll stay a bit more vanilla. But I think hopefully he wises up and gets the stick out of his butt, as you said. Hopefully he wises up and sees that he needs to set up the run game with the pass game. And by the pass game, I don't mean like deep down the field shots to soften up Auburn underneath. I'm talking about more quick, 1-step, 3-step passing concepts like slant and flat concepts and curl concepts and stops and all that good stuff, the short to intermediate stuff. That's what I'm talking about there, just to soften up Auburn on the back end. That way you can run and get maybe 4 to 5 yards per carry instead of 1.5 yards per carry, and then off of that play action and beat Auburn deep. And for the X factor for Auburn's offense, I'm going to say Ryan Davis. He's been on fire these past 3 games against Georgia, Louisiana Monroe, and then of course he absolutely went off Alabama this past week. But anyway, he's a small, quick twitch kind of guy. He's not like this guy that's 6'2", 6'3", going to burn you, kind of like a Sammy Coates type of guy. He's more of a smaller, quick twitch wide receiver that gets open a lot. And when he gets the ball in his hands, good things happen when he's in the open field. And he recently broke the record for most receptions in a season, and that was a school record. He broke Darvin Adams' old record that was set in either 2009 or 2010. And so that's the X factors for the offense. Moving on from that, we will go for the X factors on the defense. Who is the X factor on this stout dog defense for you, Alex?
And this is the same guy I had for our first game against Auburn. And this guy had a terrific game against Georgia Tech. And this is, first round, top 10 pick level talent. I'm going with the man, the myth, the legend, Roquan Smith, the best Mike linebacker in the SEC, in my opinion, and even on the stat sheet. And he's going to have a great game to contain Auburn. And whether Carry On gets 25 carries or 10 carries, he's going to have a really good game.
That's very true. That whole linebacking core for UGA is going to have a stellar game. Now, I'm going to keep my eye on for the first time that we talked about Auburn UGA. I'm going to say Jeff Holland. He leads the SEC in basically every D-line stats, sacks, quarterback hurries, quarterback knockdowns, tackles for loss. But in my opinion, he doesn't get enough national attention because he's always in the backfield. He's nicknamed Sensei Mud because he did like Taekwondo over the summer, and that's how he does his pass rush moves and has quick hands and everything. So moving on for that, we will actually now go into some little interesting tidbits, and I'll kind of close this out here. But in conference, Auburn is scoring 40.8 points per SEC game, all the while giving up exactly 19 points per SEC game. On the flip side, Georgia is scoring 36.8 points per SEC game, all the while giving up 14.3 points per SEC game. And neutral site records since 2013, Auburn is 500, 3-3, and UGA is 6-4. They play more neutral site games because the annual rivalry between Florida and Georgia, they played in Jacksonville. That's neutral site. Last 3 SEC championship game appearances, Auburn in 2004, they won. In 2010, they won. And, of course, in 2013, they won. Georgia 2005, they won that one. 2011, they lost to LSU. In 2012, they lost to Alabama. And a very, very interesting note that you actually said before we actually got on and started making the video was the team that beat Georgia in 2011 and 2012 also went on to the national championship. So if Auburn does happen to win, that's a very, very interesting stat to keep in the back of your mind. And so we'll kind of wrap things up right here because we know we're getting a bit long. And so we won't part ways without giving predictions. Alex, what is your prediction?
Well, it definitely came back to bite me in the butt when I predicted Georgia would put up 34 points because they put up exactly half that amount. But I'm going to go with a little lower score. I still think UGA puts a little points on the board. I'm going 24-23 Georgia. And obviously it's probably not going to be that exact score, but I think that range is pretty accurate, and I think it's fair to say that it can go either way somewhere in that point range.
Agreed. I think it'll be a very, very close game, but in the end, I think the Tigers pull it out 24-20. So that will do it for us here at Sweet Georgia Sports. This has been Alex Merritt. Alex, if you have anything left to say it now or forever hold your peace.
I just can't wait to see the look on your face when Georgia's holding that trophy.
That won't happen. That is a false narrative. And so, again, I know I say false narrative a lot. But anyway, so again, for Alex Merritt, I've been Alex Driskell from Sweet Georgia Sports. And I won't say go dogs. Well, if you want to say go dogs, Alex, you can.
Okay, I'll go dogs. Go
All right.
Dogs.
All right, he says go dogs. I'll say War Dang Eagle. And so for that, it's been Alex Merritt and Alex Driskell saying God bless. And we'll see what happens Saturday, Sweet Georgia Sports fans. See you later.